Jason had never believed that acts of kindness needed to be grand. Life had taught him that the smallest gestures often left the deepest impact. As a single father raising 2 kids, he didn't have much to give, no savings, no luxury, no excess, but what he did have was heart. And that heart had carried him through more nights of struggle than he cared to remember. That Thursday evening started like any other. His 10-year-old son, Liam, and 8-year-old daughter, Ellie, had been waiting outside the repair shop for him to finish up his shift. Their school bags slung over their shoulders, they sat on the curb, kicking gravel and sharing an old pack of crackers from Ellie's lunchbox. When Jason finally locked the shop door behind him, he greeted them with a tired but warm smile and stretched his arms wide. "You ready for dinner at Mimi's?" he asked. They cheered in unison. Mimi's diner wasn't fancy, just a modest family-owned place on the edge of town, but it was a place they loved. Red booths, laminated menus, and a waitress who always called them sweethearts, like it was the 1950s. On nights when Jason had a little extra, he'd take them there to share a burger and milkshake. Tonight wasn't payday, but the week had been rough, and he figured they all deserved a treat. As they walked in, Jason immediately spotted something unusual. At the far end of the diner, in a booth partially hidden behind a pillar, sat a woman with 2 small children. She had an old hoodie draped over her shoulders, her dark hair tied up in a loose bun, and a look of quiet stress painted across her face. Her kids sat silently, fidgeting with silverware and eyeing the menu like it was a fantasy novel filled with treasures they could never touch. Jason didn't want to stare, but it was hard not to notice. The woman seemed to be counting change in her palm, her eyes flicking toward the counter where the waitress stood. Her children were whispering, too quiet for him to hear, but he could read the tone in their eyes, hopeful, yet braced for disappointment. He looked at his own kids, now happily drawing on the coloring sheets the diner provided. Liam reached over to scribble something in Ellie's corner, and she shrieked in protest. Jason smiled softly, but his eyes drifted back to the other family. He didn't know their story, but he didn't need to. Something inside him stirred not pity, but recognition. He had been that parent once. Actually, he still was most days. That feeling of showing up somewhere, hoping to stretch $1 far enough to give your kids a tiny moment of normalcy. That quiet ache when they ask for something simple, like a second scoop of ice cream, and you have to say no. Not because they don't deserve it, but because the bank account just says, "Not today." The waitress passed by his table, and Jason leaned in. "Hey," he said in a low voice, nodding toward the corner booth. "That lady over there, can you bring their check to me? I'd like to cover it." The waitress looked over her shoulder. "Oh, I'm not sure they've ordered anything yet." Jason paused. "Okay. Then let me try something." He stood up, told his kids he'd be right back, and made his way over. "Hi there," he said gently, stopping just beside their table. The woman looked up quickly, eyes wide with caution. Her kids stiffened. Jason raised both hands in a small gesture of peace. "Sorry to interrupt," he said with a friendly smile. "My name's Jason. My kids and I are just over there." He pointed toward his booth, where Liam waved automatically. "I couldn't help but overhear a little, and, well, it's been a long week for us too. We were about to order some food, and I thought maybe you and your kids would like to join us." "On me." The woman stared at him, blinking. It was clear she didn't know how to respond. "You don't have to say yes," Jason added quickly. "I know it's awkward. I've just been where you are before. And I remember how hard it is to accept help, even when you really need it. But I'm offering no strings, no expectations." Her lips parted slightly, as if trying to find the right words. She glanced down at her kids, who now looked up at her with faint hope dancing in their eyes. She started, but her voice cracked a little. She cleared her throat. "That's very kind of you. But I couldn't ask you to do that." "You're not asking," he said. "I'm offering. Honestly, you'd be doing me a favor. My kids eat too fast. I need some help slowing down dinner." That made her chuckle quietly. A small but genuine sound. "I'm Maria," she said finally. "And these are my twins, Jack and Emma." "It's really nice to meet you," Jason said. "Come on. Booth's warm." The kids all slid into the seats, and soon enough, crayons were being passed across the table, coloring sheets exchanged, and giggles shared like old friends. Maria seemed to relax more with every minute. She kept glancing at Jason, unsure, but grateful. When the food came, the kids dug in enthusiastically. Maria hesitated for a second, then followed their lead. They didn't talk about money, or struggle, or what brought Maria to that diner that night. Jason never asked. He told a few silly stories about working at the shop, and Maria offered some vague anecdotes about moving to town. He noticed she was a good listener, sharp, curious, and kind. And every so often, she looked at him like she couldn't quite believe what was happening. For Jason, it wasn't about any reward or recognition. He didn't do it because he expected a thank you or some cosmic favor in return. He did it because he remembered what it felt like to wish someone would look at you not through you on, say, "Hey, I see you. You matter." At one point, while the kids argued over which milkshake flavor was best, Maria leaned in and said quietly, "You really didn't have to do this. But thank you, I mean it." Jason just smiled. "I know I didn't have to. That's what makes it real." Maria held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded. She didn't say anything else, but the emotion in her eyes said enough. When the meal ended and Jason asked for the bill, the waitress returned with a strange look on her face. She handed him a check, but it had a big red stamp on it that read, "Comped." Jason frowned in confusion. "What's this?" The waitress grinned. "The owner's covering it. Said she'd like to speak with you." Jason blinked. The owner? From the back of the diner, Maria stood up. But for Jason, even before he knew her real identity, the reward had already come. It was in the laughter of the kids, the moment of connection, and the dignity that had been restored to a stranger. That was more than enough. He had no idea that one kind gesture, given freely and without expectation, would lead to something that would soon change all their lives. But even if it hadn't, he would have done it anyway, because kindness, real kindness, never asks what it gets in return. It simply shows up. Maria had never been one to announce her success. Her life had taught her that true character wasn't revealed when people knew who you were. But when they didn't, she was a businesswoman, yes, and a very successful one at that. But more than that, she was someone who had risen from the very struggle that still lived in the eyes of too many people she passed on the street. Years ago, she had been the one counting coins at the counter of a diner, deciding whether to feed herself or her kids. That memory never left her. It wasn't shameful to her, was a reminder, a lesson. And as the owner of a fast-growing chain of diners across several states, she made it a point to visit her locations unannounced, unrecognizable, and dressed just like the person she used to be. That night, she had walked into one of her oldest branches, dressed in an oversized hoodie, worn sneakers, and hair pulled into a loose bun. She had her kids with her, Jack and Emma, both 10 years old, and they were used to their mother's odd little experiments. She'd explain it to them gently before they entered, telling them they'd go in not as the owner's kids, but just a regular family. They understood. They had heard the stories. They had seen the old photos. Maria wanted them to understand. People, not just prophets. So when they slid into the booth that night, Maria did what she always did. She watched, she observed. Not the staff. She already knew their routines and had read every customer service report twice. She watched the other diners. How did they treat the waitresses? Did anyone hold the door for an elderly person? Would anyone notice a family who clearly looked like they were struggling? She wasn't putting on an act. The hesitation in her body, the tight grip on her purse, the quiet whispers with her children, those were all real. She didn't need to perform those details. They were muscle memory. The same old script from years of being poor, careful, and always conscious of judgment. She told her kids they'd just share a small plate of fries and water, and they nodded without complaint. They were good kids. They'd been raised with more privilege than she had ever known. But she'd made sure they weren't blind to the real world. She didn't expect what happened next. From across the diner, a man approached. He looked a bit worn down by the day, probably in his 30s, wearing oil-stained jeans and a work shirt. His eyes were kind, though not pitying, just honest. He introduced himself as Jason, and something about him immediately disarmed her. He didn't pressure. He didn't make it feel like charity. He made it sound like a casual invitation, one struggling parent helping another. Just trying to make the evening feel a little lighter. Maria hesitated. She always did. It wasn't easy to accept help, even in pretend. But the offer felt genuine, and his smile didn't feel rehearsed. His kids were already waving from their booth, and her own children looked at her with eyes full of hope. She agreed. They slid into the booth together, and what followed was the most unexpected dinner she'd had in a long time. Jason wasn't just generous, he was present. He laughed with the kids, made sure everyone had enough, and didn't ask a single probing question. He didn't care why she was there, why she didn't seem to have enough money, or what her story was. He treated her like a friend, like someone who mattered. And he did it without knowing anything about her. Maria had been in countless meetings with executives and investors who only saw her net worth. They saw spreadsheets and sales projections. But this stranger, saw a person who looked tired and thought, "Let me share what little I have." That struck her. As the meal went on, she realized something else. Jason wasn't well off either. He was doing okay, but he wasn't splurging. The way he studied the menu, made sure to calculate what his kids could order, and how he offered her his help without so much as blinking it, was clear this was a sacrifice for him. It wasn't about excess. It was about empathy. When the meal ended, and Jason reached for the check, Maria gave a discreet nod to the waitress. They had a protocol in place for moments like this. If she gave the signal, the meal would be no explanation needed. She always kept it low-key. But this time, she added something extra. Tell him, she said to the waitress. The owner wants to speak with him. She excused herself to the back, slipping into a spare blazer she always kept folded in her car. She smoothed her hair into a neater shape and walked back out, the posture of a CEO replacing the humble guest who had sat down just an hour earlier. Jason looked up at her. puzzled at first, then surprised. She offered him the same gentle smile he had given her earlier. I wasn't exactly honest with you, she began. I didn't lie, but I wasn't entirely open. Jason stared at her, then looked at the waitress, then back at her. I own this place, she said. Not just this one. The whole franchise. I come in sometimes, looking like this, to see how people behave when they think there's nothing in it for them. You're the first person I've met in months who saw someone struggling and stepped up, not because of guilt or obligation, but because it's who you are. Jason looked stunned. He started to speak, but she cut in gently. I know what it's like, she said, to be where you are. I know how hard it is to give when you have so little, but you did, and that's something I never forget. You gave me more tonight than food. You reminded me that people like you still exist. He shook his head slowly, still processing it all. I didn't. I wasn't expecting anything. I know, she said. That's exactly why it matters. She told him about her story briefly, not to impress him, but to let him know that he had made a difference. She offered him her card, said there were opportunities within her company, if he was ever interested. It wasn't a favor. It was a door. One he had earned, not by being impressive or accomplished, but by being human. Maria had met 100 men in suits who wanted positions in her company, but none had left the impression Jason did. His humility, his instinct to care, and his total lack of self-interest had proven something few resumes ever could. To the rest of the diner. It was just a quiet night. Just another family sharing a meal with another. Nothing unusual. But to Maria, it was a moment of clarity. A moment where the values she had built her empire on, kindness, dignity, empathy, weren't just corporate slogans. They were alive. Sitting across from her, in the form of a single dad who didn't know her name, her title, or her bank balance. And that was exactly why she remembered his